What's going on? What's going on? Spurs family.
Let's get
What's
it up.
happening? Spurs versus everybody in the building. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I'm Marshall Bash. Got my man Greg, and we're very happy to have on with us today,
One of
Mr.
the hottest in the
Noah.
streets. Let's go.
I appreciate the love there.
Yes,
No
what's going
Magaro
on?
George.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
I mean, The Rock, writer and editor, host of, one very exciting podcast, Alamo City Limits. Just amazing guy to follow if you want to learn about the Spurs. He has, really reasonable takes, really, does his research, does everything he possibly can. Definitely a pillar in the Spurs community. So we're very honored to have him tonight and be able to talk Spurs with him.
Yep. Great
Yeah,
inside
I'm excited
knowledge.
to talk with y'all. I'm really excited to talk with y'all. Appreciate the love. I'm glad that you think I have reasonable takes. Yeah, not everybody does, but hey, you can't make everybody happy. But I'm super excited to be here with y'all. Always love talking about the Spurs.
Yeah. Before we get started, Noah, I hear you're a little bit of a hooper yourself, man.
We see the post.
I try. Yeah, I look good out there when I post the vids that I make, right? But honestly, I'm probably more like 1 for 20. Not really, but yeah, I enjoy playing basketball. It's casual. I played in middle school, got cut from my middle school team, but hey, I carried that chip, and yeah, now I ball out at the local rec center. So
let's go.
Hey, I'm with you.
Get it out the mud. How you get it?
Yeah, get it. We have a nice little show for you guys today. So everybody tuning in, it's gonna be a fun one. It's definitely gonna be a fun one today. So, G, where we starting today, my bro?
I think we just go over kind of like the questions I have about the team right now as it is constructed and where we're going. Because this is a big, kind of a weird off season. It feels kind of important, but then it kind of feels like, hey, let's just kind of just add talent as we can and keep it moving and kind of go in the progression stage, And so I guess the biggest question I think the Spurs have to answer, and kind of question I have, is they have to be all in or all out on DeJounte Murray, and especially this year, because this is he's got 2 years left on his deal. He had an all-star level season. His numbers really spiked. This would be the highest his value would be, because after this year, he becomes an expiring contract, and I don't know necessarily you're going to get as much value as you would when he's on his 2-year deal, his great 2-year deal he's on. So let me throw it to you and see how you feel about DeJounte, how you feel about, do you feel like the Spurs should be all in on him as a foundational piece? Just give me your thoughts on that topic.
Yeah, that's a really tough question to answer, right? So DeJounte Murray, because of the way the collective bargaining agreement works, next summer he will be eligible for a 3-year, $69 million extension. If you're DJ, why would you say yes to that, right? No. That's 23 mil a year, which is great. That's more than probably any of us make. But when you look at it from his perspective, he's up for after that season, so not next summer, but the summer that he's expiring, he can sign an extension with the Spurs, a max extension, and he falls between that 7 to 9 year service range where you can take up 30% of the cap. And what that looks like, just based on numbers right now, it's going to start off year one, $36.7 million. And by the final year of a 5-year extension, he'll be making $48.3 million. So if you're the Spurs, as you mentioned, that's a question that you have to answer, right? Is he worth it? And from my perspective, love DeJounte Murray. I don't know if he has another gear that he can get to, because the things that he needs to get better at are inherently difficult to get better at, right? The main weakness you see is he just doesn't really stretch the floor. And it's all fine and well if he can become a standstill three-point shooter, right? Hasn't really shown that. There were some flashes this year, but off the dribble, never been very good from three. He's shot 28% off the dribble this year. He shot 22% off the dribble the year before that, 26% off the dribble from three the year before that. I just don't really see that part of his game developing. There are not really a lot of players who can do that, even at a high volume. So when I look at him, I think he's a relatively flawed player, but a guy who maybe in a different context looks better. But is that guy, DeJounte Murray, worth the numbers that we talked about, I don't know. I mean, that is such a tough question. I would lean towards no, but if you're the Spurs, he's the only sort of fringe foundational piece that you have. So you got to be careful with him because you definitely don't want to hurt anyone's feelings or have a bad reputation as a franchise, especially a small market franchise that, let's be honest, I mean, guys aren't really lining up to get here. So you just got to be careful with the talent that you do have.
Marshall, what do you think?
Yeah, I'm a big DeJounte guy. I haven't hit it since it was debate between him and Derek White. I was always, in favor of keeping DeJounte. Having said that, signing him to that big 5-year deal where he's making, you said $48.7 million a year in that 5th year, he would be at that point 30, 31.
He'll be 27, 28 when he signs it, right? That'll be 5 years from there.
Yeah, so he'd be 32 by the
be 32.
Final year.
Okay. Yeah, because he's 20, 25, 26 right now.
Mm-hmm.
That's tough. I mean, right now, he's still, I guess he's just about to hit his prime. And we have seen him progress numbers-wise. Now, I understand off of the dribble, he's not a good three-point shooter. He's not a really good standstill three-point shooter as well. But his numbers are getting better. I understand he was in the top, 10 for usage, player usage. Am I correct? On the ball this year. That's a tough question. I'm kind of like you, Noah, leaning towards no. But at the same time, if he can show me he can improve this year, for me, getting that 3-point percentage up to around that 35, 36 range, along with upping his scoring to being somewhere in the 23 to 24 point per game score, I'm saying maybe, but that's a big ask and that's a big leap that he's got to take. And at 25, 26 years old, I don't know how much more, growing he's going to do. So this isn't a big year for him.
Absolutely. And if I could just throw one more thing out there with DeJounte, I do, and like I don't ever mean to like take anything away from him. He was an all-star, right? Injury replacement or not, he played all-star level basketball last season. But I think it's really important to like dive into the numbers a little bit. You look at his numbers versus playoff teams versus teams that made the playoffs, not the play-in, but the playoffs last year. He only averaged about 19 points per game and shot 43% from the field. When he played teams that were in the play-in or in the lottery, that number jumped up to 23 points per game and he shot nearly 50% from the field. So he plays really well against bad teams and against good teams, really not that efficient. And if you look at his game, doesn't really have a lot of moves or counter moves. He loves to drive right and then hit that right to left crossover, stop on a dime and pull up. He's got a really great first step. He can get to the rim. I think he's getting better at getting to the line, which I think is a huge key for his development. But as a distributor, as a passer, I think those assist numbers are largely inflated by, as you mentioned, top 10 in usage, but number 5 in the NBA in touches per game. Only 4 players in the NBA touched the ball more than DeJounte Murray did last year. And the Spurs, for all the equal opportunity, it was a heliocentric offense. They ran everything through DeJounte Murray. And I think, granted, it wasn't the best supporting cast, but you look at a team that runs everything through DeJounte Murray, I think what you saw last year, that's probably the peak of that team unless DeJounte Murray takes an enormous leap. And I just don't really see it. I'm just not seeing it because even with his mid-range shooting, who Spurs fans love to say, oh, elite, right? Elite. Not really. He was top 5 in mid-range attempts per game last year, but he only shot about 42% from mid-range. Everybody else in that range, Kevin Durant, granted, these are really, really good players, but like the Kevin Durants of the world and Kyrie Irvings of the world, they're all shooting closer to 50% from mid-range on similar volume. The only guy who was as bad as DeJounte, not that DeJounte was bad, he was good compared to the rest of the league, was Jason Tatum. Jason Tatum had similar volume, shot like 38% from mid-range, and I don't even know that DeJounte Murray has as deep of a scoring repertoire as a guy like Tatum. So I just have some hesitations there. I don't think his playmaking is as great as maybe some people make it out to be. A lot of it's very simple, just dump off, hit an open man. He's not really creating advantages, doesn't have a ton of gravity as a scorer. So there's a lot of questions to answer with DJ, but I would love to see him in a better context where he's not asked to be the best player, because I think DJ as your second, third best player, then he becomes more efficient. Then he's more valuable.
Yeah.
And I would love to see that, because I think a lot of pressure is on DeJounte, and it doesn't have to be that way. It does right now because of who's on the roster, but in a better situation, I think DeJounte looks so much better, and I would just love to see that.
Definitely. I think we're all kind of like, that's kind of the big, kind of like one of the bigger questions that has to be answered is like, is there another level? And can the Spurs, if there isn't another level, can the Spurs find the complementary pieces in time to kind of make this work? Because it doesn't behove either the Spurs or DeJounte to kind of just keep picking at 9 through 12 and kind of not gain a talent or going in. We're not going to get anything in free agency, you know. So I mean, that's off the table, really. And then if you're not willing to, you know, kind of be aggressive and make trades or something to get something, like it's just a lot of questions right there. It's just like, that's where it kind of starts off for me, at least.
I got a question for the both of you guys. Something I heard earlier was that there was this is a potential interest from the Wizards on DeJounte Murray. I think they said they're gonna maybe try to pursue SGA, DeJounte, and I forget who the last person was.
Malcolm Brogdon.
Who was it?
Malcolm Brogdon.
Yeah, Malcolm Brogdon. So if the Wizards were interested in trading for DeJounte, what would you want back from them? I mean, I'm assuming a pick. Player-wise, what are we talking? KCP, Kuzma, like obviously we probably wouldn't be able to get Beal from them, but that would be, you know, a goal if we could. So realistically, what would you expect the Spurs to get back from them?
To be honest, I wouldn't even entertain the idea of trading with the Wizards. I think they're also in like that similar gray area where their roster is too good and Bradley Beal's too good for you to be just outright awful, but you're also not good enough to be like a playoff team probably. So, you know, what do the assets look like for DeJounte? Are you ever going to get a player who's like of similar value? Probably not, just on guys who are on their roster and the picks. Like if they end up picking 11, 10, 9, you're kind of getting like the same pick that you already have, unless you can package that up and move up further. I just am not that interested. And like as we spoke about earlier, I think it does make sense. And I think you alluded to this, but for the Spurs, just to kind of like ride it out with DeJounte this year and see what the improvements look like. And if he seems like relatively the same player he was a year ago, then maybe it's time to consider moving him, even though that may be hard, as y'all mentioned, on an expiring deal in the last year of his contract. But I'm really fine with them riding it out with DJ this year, because I just don't think that they're in a position to have a quick fix. And I feel like quick fixes don't usually work.
Yeah.
That's the Nets.
Or
the Lakers.
The only thing I like from the Wizards, really honestly, is Denny. I'm really a big Denny guy.
Oh, Denny, I forgot Denny.
That's the only thing that would really interest me. And there's after that, it's like really nothing. I mean, you could get KCP back and try to flip him like a Josh Richardson to a contender, get another first rounder. But it's just like, I don't really want a 10th pick. You know, maybe if their pick was higher, you could kind of start to think about it. But I just like, eh. And I really like, you look at the trades around for DeJounte Murray, there really isn't really anything great. Like a lot of the teams have point guards already. They're kind of locked in. There's not a really, like, you're not going to get a really good return. So I kind of agree. You just kind of write it out and kind of see like what improvements happen. What, you know, you obviously have to look at the roster and see what their improvements are and, you know, just make a trade. It's just kind of scary to be in that middle ground, you know?
Yeah.
And trust you got to trust the front office, but to make those necessary, it's like their margin of error is really small. Like they really need to like really be on their evaluation game of talent, not only in their organization, but in the draft. And they've got to be able to pivot quick and make the right trade. It's kind of scary, but that's where we are right now.
Mm-hmm.
I guess the next question would be, you know, what would help the Spurs would be Keldon Johnson taking a leap, right? And that's kind of like what we hear in the Twitter sphere and the Spurs community is Keldon Johnson. And there's a lot of analytics saying that he's on a all-star level path, that he could possibly make that jump. And so he's up for extension. What are you doing with Keldon? Because I feel like he can get 20 million. I feel like that's a doable contract, 20 million on the market. And so I'm just wondering, do you feel comfortable giving him 20 million? Do you write it out and see, like, same thing with DeJounte, you write it out and see, hey, like, is there self-creation upside there? Do I, I'm okay paying the max if he ends up being, that dude. I mean, how do you feel about Keldon Johnson and those parameters, I guess?
Yeah, I would probably try to extend him as soon as possible, just so in the event that he does break out. Now, will he? I think that's the big question, right? That's what you're
Yeah.
asking. And personally, I don't really see it with Keldon in terms of like a massive breakout. Again, like I think Spurs fans sometimes are under the impression that because they drafted Manu where they drafted Manu and Tony where they drafted Tony and Kawhi where Kawhi was drafted and they became, all-stars, superstars, that's kind of going to be the case for any young guy who shows any amount of promise. And Keldon has been really good. He has been really good. But you look at what he's done and how he's scored the ball. 70% of his shots were assisted last year. So not a ton of self-creation there. Mostly a straight line driver, right? Doesn't have the tightest handle. Gets a little bit of tunnel vision when he's driving. Now, he has gotten a lot better at finding guys out of drives. He's had less predetermined drive where he already knows what he's going to do before the defense has shown their hand. So I like some of the progressions I've seen, but not really much of a playmaker. Not really that great of a defender either. Pretty solid man-to-man, but he does have some heavier feet. He's undersized when he plays the 4, so hopefully you can find a way to kind of slide him back to the 3, and hopefully you're not seeing that Doug, Keldon combo at 3-4. But the shooting is another thing that, okay, yeah, he's great standstill shooter, near 40%, but doesn't shoot running off screens, doesn't shoot off the dribble, isn't shooting off movement, isn't a guy who can pull up from mid-range. So like, there's just a lot of components that, okay, like, where does that come along? When does that come along? How does he show that? Because I feel like a good team probably doesn't have Keldon Johnson as their second option on offense like the Spurs did last year. And when he is your second option, like we saw, I mean, it just kind of makes it tough, and that's another question is how much of DeJounte and Keldon's production is because they had so many touches and they had that opportunity, or are they playing their ideal role? Are they? I don't think so, but he is really young. And I always try to say, age isn't necessarily an asset, but age in terms of a guy who is young and has shown promise, I wouldn't bet against Keldon necessarily, but there are a lot of things that he has to do to really improve his game and make himself a legitimate scoring threat, not just someone who needs to be fed the ball and put in the right situations.
So who is your comparison of Keldon Johnson like right now in the league? Like, who do you think he can become?
Yeah, that's really tough. I don't know if Keldon matches up too well with other guys in the league. One guy who I kind of think he reminds me of, at least who used to play in the NBA, is Corey Maggette. I don't know if y'all remember him.
Yeah,
kind of like a bruiser. He's not the athlete that Corey Maggette is, and I don't think he moves his feet as well on defense, but that style of play where you're getting downhill, you embrace contact, you can get to the free throw line, and you have some shooting potential. Sure. Like, I think that's a good player, but even Corey Maggette for most of his career was miscast as like a second option to a star who probably was miscast as a first option. So I think it's all about getting Keldon in the right situation. I'm not saying Keldon won't ever average 20 points per game, or he's not going to continue to average 17 points per game, but I think those 17 to 20 points per game can come a little bit more efficiently in a different role, or even maybe in this role. They don't ask him to have the ball in his hands a lot, and I think that's probably a good thing for now, unless he comes back from the summer as a guy who can really break you down off the dribble, make combination moves together. Like, it's tough with Keldon. Like, it really is tough with Keldon, but I like him a lot. He is a good young player, and I think the Spurs should write it out. It's just, hey, like, not everybody's going to be a superstar, and that's fine. I think if you want him to be like your third, fourth option long-term, great. Those are really hard to find too. And you found one at the 29th pick where most guys don't see a second contract. So I would be thrilled if I'm Spurs fans, even if he only is about as good as he is now, maybe a little bit better.
I would say if we're able to have him, the Spurs are able to have him as kind of in a role such as like a Jay Crowder, where he can knock down the open three, play defense, be an irritant defensively, kind of that enforcer a little bit, like Jay Crowder is. Like the Celtics, assuming like they want Grant Williams to be, I'd be fine with that. Now, Keldon necessarily starting, I think we can find somebody else to put him in the starting role and bring him off the bench. That's just me personally. 17 to 20 points a game. I honestly don't think that's really going to get us anywhere but being right where we are, if not worse. So for me, I'd bring him off the bench. If he can get 17 to 20 off the bench, cool. But efficiently, definitely has to be more efficient and work on his game. So no, you eloquently stated that. So I have nothing else really to add other than that. Just be an enforcer.
Yeah, I think for me, I'll just throw this real quick that Keldon, I think, well, in terms of the 17 to 20 points per game, I see it a lot like maybe a Drew Holiday, though obviously Drew Holiday is a vastly superior player. But, Drew Holiday only averaged about 18, 19 points per game as the main guy when he was in New Orleans, right?
Yeah.
And he goes to Milwaukee, and you don't see a drop-off in points per game. You do see an increase in efficiency and a decrease in shots per game, but because of that increase in efficiency, and you're getting better looks because you're playing with better players, your points per game average hardly takes a hit. And so I think Keldon can be kind of a guy like that, where maybe his shots go down in a better context, but his efficiency rises and he's still able to maintain that scoring average. So I like him as a starter, but I hear what you're saying as a guy who can come off the bench. I just think he is a starter caliber player, probably not a 4, even though the NBA is positionless, but I think for him, like starting at the 3, I think he's a good starting 3.
Fair.
Yeah, it's the only thing that bothers me, like it was easy to give DeJounte and Derek those contracts because their value is always tied to their defense, right? I always felt like you could, if things went bad for them, their defense would always carry a significant weight in the league where they were be able to get pretty good value for them. With Keldon, it's kind of the reverse. You're betting on the offense taking a leap versus the defense, and if that doesn't come through, you're kind of like, well, it's a fine contract. We're building small teams, so it's not really going to be like albatross, and you probably could get off of it later down the line if anything was the worst case scenario. But that's kind of like the dynamic I'm a little eerie about.
Yeah, I think that's fair. There are a lot of questions to answer around the Spurs roster, and they're difficult ones. They're not easy decisions. I'm glad that I'm not, Brian Wright or Pop or anybody in that front office, because they have a tough job to do. Yeah. And we just get to sit here and say, this is what I think, and then we can criticize them later, which is so much more fun than having to be the guy who has to make the decision. So,
yeah. And watching Mobley and then probably next year Wembanyama just kind of sail away from us is very painful.
Yeah, it's tough. I don't mean to, traumatize any Spurs fans, but the Spurs only won 4 more games than the Kings this year, and they only won 7 more games than the Raptors a year ago. And man, I'm not saying you should tank. And I think people get this like twisted that when I say, sit out the last 10, 15 games, that's not tanking. Tanking is what the Sixers did, where you're intentionally losing all year. You gave these guys 70 games.
At point guard.
Like, exactly. It's like you gave these guys 70 games to show what they can do.
Mm.
You know who they are after 70 games. Those last 12 games, 15 games, you can call it a night. Like if you, it really, to me, it is the difference between drafting. Maybe you get Jeremy Sohan or you get Osman Dieng, who are both relative project players, or you have a shot at a Jaden Ivey or a Paolo Banchero at 4. It's just a big difference. And I understand the philosophy that Pop's talked about. You don't want to instill bad qualities in these guys, and it would be a disservice to not let them compete. But, hey, DeJounte Murray's your best player. He clearly wants help. If the best way to get him help is to let him rest the last 15 games, then so be it. That's just my opinion, though. I understand that people don't always agree with that, and that's fine. I understand the other side of the coin as well.
Just do what the Thunder did.
Talk about job security.
Yeah.
All right, so the last couple questions are Josh Richardson, Jakob Poeltl, both expiring deals. Do you see them? I mean, do you see them keeping both? Do you keep one or the other? You think they're both gone this offseason? Kind of like, let me know what you think.
Josh Richardson is so interesting. I think he made Lonnie Walker really expendable because he's a guy who, one, he doesn't need the ball to thrive, right? He can just kind of float off ball, relocate. He's a good cutter, a good transition player, really strong defender. Like, I think everybody always wanted Lonnie to be a really good defender, but Josh Richardson actually is a strong on-ball defender with good team instincts, a great communicator, and he's a leader. I mean, you saw him the second he got in San Antonio. He was hyping up Josh Primo, was in his ear telling him, you can do this, you can do that. This is what you need to do. And one of my favorite moments was when Lonnie Walker hit that game winner against OKC. The first thing he said was, Josh Richardson told me that was my shot. I was going to hit it. Like, he just has this quality about him where it's so unselfish, selfless. He loves to see others succeed, and he thrives by watching others succeed, and he succeeds out on the court just with his skill set. I like him a lot. I think he's worth keeping around for San Antonio if they really do want to be competitive. As for Jakob, that's an interesting one because he will also be, up for a new contract. And I think his value is actually pretty high. I wouldn't be surprised if he got anywhere from $16 to $22 million on the open market. And do you want to pay him that much? I don't know. Like, I would probably lean towards no. Love him. I do think he's a legitimate top 10 to 12 center, but how valuable is a traditional center in the NBA right now? He's not quite a rim deterrent like Rudy Gobert, so he's probably not worth that money, but he also just doesn't really have a lot of more modern skills. Like, don't get me wrong, great player. I think vastly underrated.
Knees.
Yeah, he did that one on that one play. Absolutely. But he is a guy who I think, you can probably move on from, and it won't hurt you that much in the long run. Like, you may lose more games, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. So, and I guess it depends on, do they want Aiden? Are they interested in Jalen Duren? Like, there's a lot of questions to answer there as well.
Josh Richardson is the Spurs replacement for Patty Mills as far as the energy that he brings, and as it seems to be a team guy, good defensive player, not a bad 3-point shooter. I mean, I like him. I personally do like him a lot. And you're right. We'll get into Lonnie in just a little bit. As far as Pirtle, hey, Warriors, do you want him? Because I'll take James Wiseman. I've been talking about this since the day he came in. But yeah, I'm not paying him 16 and 22 million. I'm sorry. That's a lot of money. Not gonna get us over the hump. So I don't think DeAndre Ayton will either, but you got to see if you can get something for Pirtle because he's not gonna be our starting center to get us back. I even think in the playoffs.
Yeah, not with this roster. Yeah, probably not with this roster. Because like you mentioned, I mean, if he's in Golden State, oh my God, he's such a huge upgrade over Kevon Looney. He makes them so much better. I mean, he improves a defense that's already so good. But, for San Antonio, when DeJounte's your best player and Keldon might be your second best player, yeah, he probably can't be your third best player. So, yeah, I get what you're saying for sure.
And now put him next to Jaren Jackson Jr. at the 4, and then give him another, small forward, Andrew Wiggins, OG Anunoby type. Then I think you could be at least a second-round team. I think he's still a quality. I mean, we saw Steven Adams. I think he's better than Steven Adams at this point in his career.
Oh yeah.
So, and on Memphis, so I still like Pirtle. I've always rooted for him. I've always said like it's unfair. Like, it's just the 4 perimeter position. I'm always like, can we look at that situation? I know Pirtle's kind of like by himself out there, getting hosed on the left and right. I thought it was, he had to watch LaMarcus Aldridge jump from the paint to contest a 3. I mean, things were rough for Pirtle. but the things with Richardson and Pirtle is like, we're in a rebuilding situation. I don't want to tie up money to guys. I want to keep cap flexibility. Yeah. So I'd rather cash them out on assets and keep that cap flexibility open to a situation that we can capitalize later down the line. That'd be my big selling point for getting rid of both of them. I love Josh Richardson though. I think he's a perfect kind of like modern day fit, what you kind of need as a player. So it's tough, man. Those are another tough decisions you got to make.
Greg, I also remember you mentioning a scenario where you would like to see Pirtle to the Hornets for, was it PJ Washington?
Oh God, yeah. Yeah, I would. I just think PJ Washington is like an imperative piece that you need. I think a guy, they'll probably be able to find in the draft too, but a guy that can be the 4, possibly small ball 5 because of his length. He's a 7-foot plus wingspan. I think he's very, high field kind of guy. I think he could definitely run, dribble handoffs and stuff. I just think he's a really good chess piece to have that the Spurs could bring in and possibly get better on the perimeter while they get worse on the interior. And then, because I look at centers as more like the running back or like the cherry on top of everything. Like that's the last thing I'm really focused on. Like I'm trying to get the perimeter players in order, and then I can find a center anywhere. I don't want to say anywhere, but like you can find a good center. Like I think you can find a good center. So that's kind of the way I look at philosophy wise, team building. But yeah, I would love PJ Washington for sure.
Fair.
But now Lonnie Walker, man, like, okay, so I had the last season, I had the premonition, I've had the feeling deep in within my soul that Patty Mills wasn't coming back. And I was like, everybody was telling me Patty Mills is coming back. And I'm like, nah, bro, it's not coming back. He's not coming back. Like there's something in my soul. There's something in my soul telling me Lonnie Walker is coming back. I don't know. I just can't shake the feeling. I know it doesn't make sense. I know it's kind of like, well, it's like another Forbes situation. Like we have too many people. We kind of want to get more development to see what Primo has. Possibly we'll bring in another guard. Josh Richardson stays. He's kind of like can play the 1, 2, or 3. Technically, you could, there's some versatility with him. But I know you're kind of like, hey, let's let Lonnie Walker go, Noah. But is there a scenario you see him coming back?
I guess if they want to try to get him back on a team-friendly deal and he wants to sign a team-friendly deal, I don't really know. To be honest, I've been pretty down on Lonnie for the last couple of seasons. I think you can kind of take a lot away from players from what they show you, their mentality is on the court. Now, like obviously you can't get into their head. You don't necessarily know what they're thinking, but he shared a lot of what he's thinking, on like just with his body language. And then this doesn't matter that much. At the end of the season, he was frustrated. He didn't get to play like he thought he was going to play in the playing game. And he went on Twitter and he was liking things about, they got to get Lonnie, this and that. And yeah, that doesn't really matter that much. But you look at Lonnie's career and it's mostly been this empty promise, right? Where, oh, he's going to be this guy. He can do this and that. And I've always thought it's so interesting because people thought, okay, this is that dude. After he had 28 points against the Houston Rockets, he came up with some big shots at the end of a game, and love Lonnie, but those 28 points are not the same as like a 28 points from Bradley Beal where, he take you off the dribble, he can get to the rim, he can shoot off movement, he's valuable in every facet of offense, right? Lonnie's 28 points were almost entirely catch and shoot. He didn't really, create anything for himself. He's not a guy who has the particularly tight handle. He's not a guy who can string together a lot of moves without losing the ball. He's a guy who can, thrive in transition because he's an excellent athlete. And when he gets downhill and he can, bring in a couple of defenders, he can dump it off to Pirtle with a little shovel pass or a wraparound. And it looks pretty and it's really cool. But at the end of the day, he's a guy who's been inefficient from every part of the court every single season. He's had a few years here and there where he shot well from 3, but I mean, there's not a lot to me that you can get out of Lonnie, not in this role. If Lonnie's going to be like the 5th, 6th, option on this roster, not in terms of on the floor, obviously you only have 5 guys on the floor, but if he's like your 5th, 6th option every night, I don't think you're going to get that much out of him. And I'm fine to let him walk. I just don't really see the upside there. Maybe he figures it out with another team. But if I'm the Spurs, I'd let him walk. I think you already have so many guards on this roster, and you just invested a lottery pick in Primo. See what he's got. I don't think you need to continue investing in a 5th year or 6th year or 7th year of Lonnie. Let someone else make that decision. So that's just how I see it, though.
Yeah, I tend to agree. I've kind of been out on Lonnie, just never been really a Lonnie guy. I think as much as I love Derek White, Lonnie, and Pirtle, I think with those 3 players specifically, it's a confidence issue. I think if they were more confident players and believed in themselves to a point, I think they would be even better than they are. And I think that's always teetered with kind of all of them. And I think that's a common thread. And I think you can see the confidence that DeJounte, Primo, Keldon, Vassell have. It just makes a ton of difference. And that's when I saw Derek lost his confidence this year. I'm like, damn, man, it's going to be really hard for him to get it back. I hope he gets it back, and I hope he plays well because I know what he's capable of. But it's that confidence factor that I saw in his eyes that he kind of lost, along with the vertical pop. I thought he lost some vertical pop on his ability to get to the rim.
Yeah,
but it was the confidence, and then we know, Lonnie's backstory and his confidence. It just, man. But I have this feeling he's coming back. I don't know what it is. I just have this feeling that he's coming back. It's just really weird.
Yeah, and I think that's fair. I mean, right?
Yeah.
I mean, the Spurs try to retain their guys, like they have
Yeah.
retained a lot of their guys, but I don't know. I was kind of sad when the Spurs didn't retain Kyle Anderson, and I can't help but feel like Kyle Anderson would be more useful to this team than a Lonnie Walker would.
Yeah,
and
connecting piece, defender.
I don't know that Lonnie is that guy who's gonna really bring a lot to the table night in and night out. Just so streaky. Such a streaky guy. And as you mentioned, just the confidence fluctuates as well. I don't know. I just love Lonnie. I'm not saying anything about him as a human being, but as a player, I think I'm ready to see him, move on, maybe to a more ideal situation. Maybe San Antonio isn't where he belongs.
And I always felt like it was like a Kelly Oubre Golden State situation where Kelly Oubre, not necessarily a great fit for Golden State in their system. But you send him to Charlotte where he's able to just run, kind of just be himself, just kind of like not think and just do. That was a better situation for him. I think the same thing with Lonnie. I think it's just too much thinking within the system, and he's always thinking about plays and thinking about next read and trying to outthink things. And it's just like, nah, just go out there and play, man. And I think that's always been the kind of disconnect. So I would like to see him, I think, in a different, hopefully in a different, change of scenery would help him.
How many more years does he have left on his current?
He's donezo.
Oh, he's done. So this is it. Okay, I was thinking he had one more year left. No. If you bring him back, if you do bring him back, I would say this would be his year that he's unopposed by, either having a Derek White, DeJounte, whatever battle that was going on that made him kind of lose his confidence, as you were alluding to, Greg. Now we may see if he has that full trust and pop and not such a short leash to go out and just ball if he does come back. And this would be my complete last straw, because if he doesn't do anything, then it's like, all right, we can ship him off. Then again, if he does ball out, you may be able to get some more value for him. It's really hard for me to say. We let him walk, that it is kind of what it is.
Yeah.
But I mean, I've like Lonnie. He's quite athletic. If he can just get that, I've seen so many times where it looks like he has it with that shot, especially when he pulls up. But it's just not completely there. And I agree with you, Noah, on the handles. He doesn't have a tight handle. He's got to really work on that to get himself just on that next level. I feel like he's like right on the cusp of it, but it's just something missing. So if we bring him back, okay. If not, okay. That's That's
Yeah,
kind
that's
of
kind
what
of
it
like,
is.
okay.
Yeah, you know.
Yeah, I'm fine either way.
Yeah,
I'm
it's
fine
like,
either way. I have a
Julio
preference,
Jones,
but either way,
Debo.
it's not gonna break my heart either way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'd rather skip the offseason. I'd rather not talk Aiden, Levine, John Collins, OG. Like, I don't think it kind of stuff gives me a headache.
Oh, I have a quick take on that.
Okay, go ahead.
No, I don't want any of them. I don't want to lock up long money in either one of those guys. Now, what I will say, there's a guy that is a free agent, and I
Let me
say
guess.
take a chance.
Bobo. Let me guess. Bobo.
You already know. I say take a
You
chance
love
on
that
the
Bobo, man.
man.
That Bobo.
Take a chance on him. Why not? He's 7'3". He can shoot the three. Bring him off the bench. Give him a shot. I'm just saying. Anyway, that aside.
You have a Bobo take every once. Either Wiseman or Bobo has to appear on the show.
Yeah. I feel like Denver
Dang.
misused him. But anyway,
Yeah.
that's neither here nor there.
The
Go
last
ahead,
couple
Jay.
of minutes, let's get into some draft talk because that's kind of like want to pick your brain on some things.
Sure.
We got the 9th pick. I don't think Ben Mathurin will be there, but let's say in a scenario, Ben Mathurin, Shaden Sharp, AJ Griffin, and Johnny Davis are all there. Who are you kind of taking? Who are your top 3 in that scenario? Or can you arrange them in the order like you like them?
Yeah, I think Shaden Sharp is probably number 1 out of those guys for me, just because I think he has the highest upside out of all those players. You know, I had the luxury of being a subscriber to Synergy, and so I can watch all of his EYBL tape. I can watch all of his games at Dream City Christian Academy, and he had some really intriguing off the dribble impact as a senior, right? As a senior on that EYBL circuit, he really broke out at the Peach Jam. He was taking guys off the dribble, step back threes, pull up mid-range jumpers, finishing really strong at the rim, great play finisher in transition. Now, the one thing that I kind of question about him is he doesn't have as much burst as you would think for a guy who has a reported like 45, 46-inch vertical, which is absolutely insane, by the way. And he didn't play any defense. He played none, 0 defense. And I think that's not that weird with, high school stars. So I think he is a pretty high boomer bust, but he reminds me a lot of just the way he was able to dominate a game, both on and off ball, kind of like a Jalen Green a few years that we saw him in high school and then in the G League. So if you want to take a bet on him, sure. He's my number 1. Number 2 for me would be Benedict Mathurin. Number 3 is Johnny Davis, who I also think is going to be a really nice pro. And then last for me is AJ Griffin. He's the guy who kind of scares me the most. I do like him a lot. He's 12th on my big board, I believe. I'd have to look that up again. But yeah, just some of the athletic concerns and the injury history. I think you're banking on a lot of, athletic recuperation from him. And I don't know. There's not a lot of guys who I can name off the top of my head who suffered a lot of lower extremity injuries, knee injuries, serious knee injuries, who come back and they're just as athletic or more athletic. So that's a pretty big worry for me. And he was a pretty awful defender at Duke. He had moments, obviously, really strong, looked good in the post at times, really contained drives in moments because of his length and his strength, but generally looked pretty bad, and that worries me as well. So he's the last guy. Just too many question marks for me with him.
Yeah, I feel like the tide has turned on AJ Griffin. I think earlier in the season, you had a lot of people going top 6, top 5, had him in that conversation. I feel like something feels like it's the tide's turning on him, whether it be the defense, maybe the medicals are getting leaked out more. But it seems like he's really dropping at this point, kind of more like around where you said the 12th range, where he could be he's going to be in play for us, I think. So it's interesting. Sharp, he's just so hidden, man. He's just a hidden prospect. He worked out for the Spurs. So the Spurs were able to get a look at him. So, and there's smoke out there that he hasn't been performing well in workouts, but I think that's just smoke. I really feel like Presti's trying to get him and trying to figure out a way to get him.
It could be. I also think it wouldn't be that crazy that he isn't playing well in the workouts just because he hasn't played. Yeah, he hasn't played basketball. When we get to Las Vegas Summer League, it'll be exactly a year since he played basketball in an organized setting, not in practice, not against, guys in workouts, but like actual competitive organized basketball against another team that's trying to beat you. So I think that's kind of a tough transition to go from, oh, I'm on the EYBL circuit playing against the best high school talent, and now I'm playing against, NBA players, guys who are going to be in the NBA. So who knows? It could be a smokescreen too, though, because that kind of stuff happens as well.
Definitely. Where's Johnny Davis on your big board? I feel like he's very divisive.
Johnny Davis, I've seen for some people as low as like 16, 17, which I think is a little bit outlandish, just considering how productive he was and given his context. But for me, I have Johnny Davis all the way up at 8 on my big board. I understand that there are flaws with him. He wasn't the most efficient scorer. He had the same usage percentage as a guy like Trae Young, but he averaged less than 2 assists per game. But he also was on a team that finished 343rd in 3-point efficiency out of like 360 Division I programs. And then they also finished like 250th in 3-point rate. So the spacing was really bad. He was asked to self-create 78% of his offense. Like, that's just a really tough situation. And given how difficult it was, and by the way, they had 7 seniors graduate. So he was coming into a program that was supposed to be bad this year. I just feel like the success on the court with the program and his tenacity as a defender, all of that, and the polish to his mid-range game, he's just too good to pass up on. I think if you're the Spurs, potentially, depending on who is there. I think there are better fits, but he is a really good basketball player. Granted, he thrives off of tough shot making, but I think his life will get easier with NBA spacing and better teammates, because he didn't have very good teammates at Wisconsin.
True. Yeah, he's very divisive. I've seen, people have him about 6. I've seen people seeing him, like you said, around 16 sometimes, and I'm just like, I understand the appeal for him. It's not the sexiest pick. I think people would be like, why are we getting Johnny Davis? Like, but I understand it. Like, if that's the pick, I understand it. Like, I'm not really overly like mad. I'm not really mad about a lot of picks. I mean, I think like, I don't know, like Ty Washington at 9 would kind of like, that would be like the one that would get me. I think the only one that would probably get me up in arms. But I prepared myself this year.
Yeah, that and Ochai Agbaji. I was talking to Rafael Barlow on one of my last podcasts, and he said that the Spurs do have genuine interest in Ochai Agbaji. So I don't think that they would take him 9, but he is rumored to kind of be in that lottery range. He was invited to the green room. Granted, there was like 24 or 25 guys who've been invited at this point. So maybe he's a target for 20, but man, that would be like the only guy who would really like make me pretty frustrated if they took him at 9. I don't think they would. I don't think any team will, but who knows? I mean, they took Primo a year ago. I just feel like I'm bracing for whatever.
For sure.
Anything could happen. Anything could happen at this point.
Now, Agbaji at 20 would actually be interesting. Not to
he would be.
Talk. Bobo and Agbaji. Super team.
I do like Agbaji. Having him at 20 would actually be an interesting pick. I wouldn't be completely mad at that. But for the 9th pick, what happened to all the talk about Jalen Duren?
Yeah, I mean, that's the popular pick between analysts and fans. Everybody desperately want an athletic center, which I don't see like the track record for the Spurs doing that. But it makes sense. Like Pirtle's, they're connecting the dots, right? Pirtle's probably on his way out. Spurs might be heading towards maybe like a more of a youth movement. They grab a high potential young prospect in Duren, who everybody pretty much says that he's kind of a lock for a defensive, probably top. What do you say, Noah? Like top 5 defensive center in the league if he reaches his ceiling.
Yeah, 5 to 10. I don't know. I really, really like him.
Okay.
In the mocks that I've done recently, now he wouldn't be my first pick depending on who's there, but on the mocks that I have done with other, beat writers and draft experts and analysts and stuff, he's been the pick that I've made 3 times out of 3, just based on who's there. And I think you look at the timeline with when they took Josh Primo, and I think it says that they're not afraid to go young. I agree that there's no history of them taking big men. I mean, the last time they took somebody like that early, it was Timmy, right? Like they're not taking bigs that early, mostly because they haven't drafted that early in a while. But I think when you look at Jalen Duren context was so poor at Memphis. It was ridiculous. He didn't play with the point guard. They ran Amani Bates, who has pretty limited passing feel, as their point guard for the first half of the season. There wasn't a lot of spacing there, and somehow he's still ranked in the 93rd percentile as a roll man, really efficient, showed some really good flashes as a short roll passer, was really good as a passer out of high-low actions. I don't know. I think you're looking at a guy who almost is very comparable to a Robert Williams, a guy who can go guard out on the perimeter a little bit in a pinch, a guy who protects the rim, moves his feet well, lob threat, can pass a little bit. You know, there was a pass that Robert Williams made last game from the top of the key
That was nice,
where,
dude.
oh my God, like you don't see a lot of centers make that
nice.
pass.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying Jalen Duren's going to be running pick and roll or he's going to be a ball handler or he's going to shoot the ball, but I think Robert Williams' value is capped a little bit by his size, but Jalen Duren's a legit 6'11" at 250 with a huge wingspan, like a plus 7'4", 7'5" wingspan.
So he's officially 6'11"? I know there was talk. I know there was talk
like
that he was 6'9".
Yeah, there's talk
6'10".
that he's 6'9", 6'10". I don't know. When I saw him out there, and again, he didn't measure at the combine, so this is just based on the eye test. But when he was standing next to a guy like Chet Holmgren, who is 7'1", 7 feet tall, he didn't look that much smaller. So I think he has legitimate size. I think he's a guy who has upside, and the Spurs don't have a guy who can like Pirtle, great rim protector, no doubt. I think top 5 in the league, but he just isn't that switchable out on the perimeter. And he's also not a lob threat. And for as poorly as like Jalen Duren shoots the ball right now, he still has vastly higher shooting potential than a guy like Jakob Pirtle. I mean, he didn't shoot well from the free throw line, and his shot looked pretty awful at Memphis. But I think if you're investing the 9th pick in him, your highest pick since Timmy, he's going to work with Chip England. He's going to get any assistance he can to develop. And I think it's important to remember, you know, players have had access to Timmy and to David Robinson, right? As a mentor, sometimes they're in the practice facility. If he really comes into San Antonio and just says, hey, I want to be a sponge, link me up with those guys, who knows? Like just the physical gifts alone, I think he could be a really good player down the line. I'm not saying superstar. I'm not saying Dwight Howard, because I know he gets those comparisons sometimes, but a player who's better than, you know, Robert Williams is a fringe all-star to all-star level talent. I like that for San Antonio.
And it's interesting that you said Dwight Howard, because I've seen, from what I have seen, I compare him a little bit because I thought he was about 6'9", a little undersized, to a guy like Bam Adebayo, who I also somewhat compared to Dwight Howard. He's kind of in that, you know, range. And especially one thing about Bam that people underutilize, or that they underutilize, is his passing ability, because he's not a bad passer. So if Duren can do something,
he's a great offensive hub.
Bam, and also
like
defensive hub, and be a lob threat along with work on his shot. Yeah, I think he's definitely a lock at 9. But to your question, Greg, I think Shaedon Sharpe, if not Duren, would be my guy to take at, you know, the number 9 pick. He got a 7-foot wingspan at, you know, 6'5", very Jalen Green-esque type of player, exciting, something I don't think the Spurs have really had. Well, what we kind of thought we might have in Lonnie, you know, I think we might have in Shaedon Sharpe if we were to take him there. But I would go him. Then I'd probably go Johnny Davis and then Mathurin. And then I don't want AJ Griffin at all. And
that's coming from a Duke fan.
Dang, yeah, that's tough. That's brutal.
Tough.
That's brutal, but you got to be honest sometimes.
I saw him at Duke. He didn't impress me. Really, nobody on the squad. Like, they're all good role players outside of Banchero. Like, I didn't see anybody that was just like, oh my gosh, this guy could be a difference maker. Like, if he goes to a different team, he might be fine as a role player. But that's pretty much all the Spurs have right now is role players. I want a guy who can ascend above that.
Yeah,
you know, potentially.
That's great. Yeah, I agree with you. That should be the goal. They need top end talent. They don't really need role players. I love that.
Yeah.
Coach K is sad right now, Marshall. Coach K.
Hey man, you know, it is what it is.
They know any dark horses at 9?
Any dark horses at 9? You know, if there's
primos?
a primo, I think there is one guy who maybe Spurs fans aren't I mean, I think if you're into the draft, you probably know his name, but Osman Dieng out of the NBL, New Zealand Breakers, I think he's got all-star upside. I think one of the best comps I think that I've heard from a person is Rafael Barlow talked about him with us, and he said, look, people aren't going to, be blown away by this name. It's not super sexy, but prime Nicholas Batum, sort of like born in the wrong era, like a guy who can shoot the three, a guy
Still
who
in the
can pull
league.
up off the dribble, a guy who can get to the rim, finish at the rim, play, make out of the pick and roll, defend multiple positions at 6'9", 6'10". Like maybe that wasn't as valuable in 2009, 2010, but in 2022, that's a super valuable archetype. So if he can reach that sort of ceiling, I think that that's a fringe all-star to all-star level talent. And he is a guy who, look, he doesn't finish that well at the rim right now. Super streaky shooter, not particularly not particularly refined as an offensive guy, more of a pass first than a score first guy, can be really passive and disappear for times. But one of the youngest guys in the class. The physical tools are really impressive, not super explosive, but just really fluid. I think he's a guy worth taking a bet on at 9 if you really want to go for a home run swing. But I think the better route would be take whoever you really like at 9 and then try to trade up to 17 with 20 and 25 and 38 to go get him if he's still there. That way you have 2 bites at the apple and you're not risking the first one being a massive reach.
Definitely. I think him and I'm a little lower on consensus than on Sohan than a lot of people are. I think they're kind of like in the same bracket, like you're betting on the shot, right? And you're betting they're kind of high field guys. I think Sohan's probably the better defender of the two, but you just bet on the shot. And I just don't really buy the shot on Sohan, so I kind of have him lower. But yeah, I could see definitely the dang swing for sure, like big upside swing that 6'10", 6'9". I had him, I tweeted out, in the beginning of this in the drafts era, it was like he's probably gonna be Zaire Williams, where he's just a big 6'9", 6'8", 6'9" guy. It's gonna be, I didn't know he was 6'10" at the time, but I was like, he's probably like gonna be a 6'9" guy that just moves fluidly, that people are gonna be like, you just don't see guys of that nature really move like that and have the ability. I think Dang has probably a better high feel for the game than Zaire Williams was. So I'm not surprised if he goes 9. I wouldn't be really surprised if he was the home run swing for the Spurs.
And I know that like context is a word I keep using, but I do think it's super important for every prospect. Like Osman Dieng came into the NBL knowing almost no English, and the only person he knew on the team was Hugo Besson, who's also French. He played with in the youth ranks in France, and they played in a bubble, right? Like you remember the NBA played in a bubble. They played in a bubble, and they were not allowed any family or friends. So he only knew one guy. He hardly spoke any English. He's transitioning from lower levels in France to a legitimate pro league in Australia. And so I'm just not that surprised that he struggled. And I think at the end of the season, when he really went on that tear where he was more aggressive, more efficient, really was putting it all together, I think that's probably closer to who he actually is than the guy we saw at the beginning of the year. Because just imagine that, being thrown into another country, don't really know the language, you don't really understand the culture, one person on the team, no family, no friends, you're in a bubble, you can't leave, you're 18 years old. I don't think I could do that. So I think that's why I would bet on Osman Dieng, but I also understand there's like a pretty significant risk there as well.
Yeah, for sure. Shout out to my guy Jalen Williams. I'm ready for you at 9, just in case. I'm prepared myself. Just saying, if you like Josh Richardson, you're probably gonna like Jalen Williams. So that's kind of my pitch for him. Let's talk about like 20. I know you gotta get out of here real quick. Any other names 20 to 38 you kind of like? Oh, let me ask you about Jake LaVerriere real quick. Do you buy the defensive versatility on him?
Yeah, so you're right. I do have to head out in just a few minutes, but I do really like Jake LaRavia. I think it just depends on who is there in that range. But if he's there at 25 and somebody else who's higher on my big board isn't available, then I think he's a good fit. He's not really old. Like his age was listed wrong on a lot of draft sites for a while, and now we know he's only 20 years old, but got quick feet, got pretty fluid hips, good footwork, good length, covered guards, covered Paolo Banchero, shut down Kennedy Chandler. I think that he does have legitimate versatility. Now, I don't think in the NBA he's going to be guarding 1 through 5. You're probably looking at like 2 through 4 at best in the NBA. But he is a guy who knocks down an open shot, has a little bit of pick and roll playmaking ability. And he's also one of those guys that is similar to like a Thaddeus Young or even a Robert Williams that like, yeah, they're not really going to handle the ball that often, but if you get them the ball, top of the key, or you have them on dribble handoffs, they can find teammates. They got good court vision. So I like him. I don't know that he has a lot of upside. I think he kind of like, this sounds awful for a 20-year-old. I don't mean it in a bad way. I'm sure he can get better, but I kind of think he is what he is outside of polishing a few of his skills. Because I just don't think he's ever going to be a guy who really, dominates a game in any way. It's more like a connector piece, glue guy than an upside swing. But I like him. He's interesting for sure.
Agreed. Real quick question. Favorite project forward: John Butler, Josh Minot, Dominic Barlow, or who's the last guy I want to throw in there? I think that'd probably be it. I can't think off the top of my head if I could throw another one in there. But which one would you take a swing on?
I think John Butler. John Butler is really intriguing for me. Got really unique movement skills. Moves more like a guard than a 7-footer. Really skinny. Like he's 20 pounds lighter than Chet Holmgren. So really, really skinny. Can shoot the 3 ball. Can attack closeouts a little bit. Protects the rim fairly well. I think he's still pretty raw in almost every aspect of the game. But like you bring him in as a project, then yeah, he's intriguing.
All right, Marsh, you got anything real quick?
I think that's really all I have.
All right, cool, man. Cool. Noah, always a pleasure. Hope to have you and your co-host back on sometime after the draft, possibly, maybe deep in the off season. I know it's going to be a lot of off season. So I appreciate very much, man, for coming on, giving us the time you have. It's very grateful and love talking with you.
Of course, and thank y'all so much for bringing me on. I am running out of time because we're about to head out. I wish we didn't have to cut it off earlier because I love talking to y'all. I love talking Spurs basketball. We should do this again really soon. But again, appreciate you guys. I had a blast talking basketball with y'all.
And where can everybody follow you if you want to drop that real quick?
Yeah, you can find me at _Magaro, Magaro on Twitter. And that's pretty much like my main, social media. And then find my writing at Pounding the Rock, all the Spurs coverage there. So yeah, that's about it for me.
Right, whenever you're back in San Antonio, man, let's go. Run some fives.
Yeah, let's hoop. Let's hoop. Yeah. We're heading to Austin actually right now, but for like a little vacation. But hey, next time I'm in SA. Yeah, for sure. Let's get together.
Sounds good, man.
All right, guys. Well, everybody, appreciate you tuning in, and if you're seeing this on the replay, appreciate it. Hit that like button, subscribe, and everybody, just hands clap for Noah Magaro George joining us today. And everybody, thank you.